We begin with what's expected to be a landmark hearing at the International Criminal Court. In the coming hours, the court will hear arguments on whether Israel is committing genocide in its war on Gaza. Well, the case brought by South Africa accuses Israel of violating the 1948 UN Genocide Convention with mass killings, expulsions and statements describing Palestinians as subhuman. Well, ahead of that hearing, Israel has continued to pound the Gaza Strip with airstrikes. 25,000 Palestinians, more than 10,000 of them children, have been killed so far. The UN says Gaza has become uninhabitable. Well, Palestinians across the occupied West Bank have been rallying in support of South Africa's case. The territory has seen a surge in illegal settler activity, attacks and Israeli army raids. From The Hague, Vaessen begins our coverage.
Seen as one of the most prominent cases in the more than 75-year-long history of the International Court of Justice. 17 judges will have to decide if Israel is committing genocide, that is, deliberately wiping out Palestinians in Gaza as an ethnic group entirely or in part. The Genocide Convention was anonymously adopted in 1948 after World War II, a unified commitment by the international community to never let atrocities like the Holocaust happen again. South Africa decided to bring the case before the world's highest court after UN resolutions calling for a stop to Israel's actions in Gaza were either vetoed or ignored by Israel.
There is a compelling argument that genocide is being committed in Gaza on the basis that there is an annihilation or cleansing of a civilian population, and also the quotes of Israel ministers and generals of the army aimed to annihilate the entire population of Palestine from the Gaza Strip. Our founding father has been very clear that South Africa is not free until the people of Palestine are free.
Israel denies it is committing genocide, calling the case blood libel, a false anti-Semitic accusation. They say history will judge South Africa. The Israeli delegation was not available to comment Wednesday. Experts on international law call it ironic that 75 years after the Genocide Convention was adopted because of the Holocaust, it will be Israel that will be in the dock facing genocide accusations. The stakes here at the Peace Palace in The Hague are high because the UN court is the highest body the UN has to uphold international law. South Africa has asked the court for an urgent injunction to stop Israel's military campaign. While cases at the ICJ usually take years, a decision on provisional measures is expected within weeks.
The prestige of the UN as a whole, as a system, is hanging in the balance here. This is a moment for the West to actually answer to the sanctity of international law that they have held so sacred.
ICJ or World Court decisions are binding, but the court has no power to enforce them. Recently, Myanmar and Russia ignored verdicts to stop potential genocidal acts. South Africa hopes that if they win, it will further increase international pressure on countries like the United States, who are backing Israel, to do more to stop the fighting. Vaessen, Al Jazeera, The Hague.
Well, Stephanie Decker joins us live now from occupied East Jerusalem. Steffi, so what's been the reaction to this in Israel so far, and what are we expecting on Thursday then?
Well, Israel categorically denies the charges. We will be hearing from them on Friday. What we expect today is to hear from South Africa, their application for preliminary measures, basically to argue that Israel is committing genocide, not preventing genocide, not doing enough to deal with those who are committing genocide. What's interesting is that South Africa will be laying out a case that goes back before October the 7th. This is to counter the argument that Israel will be putting forward, where it's going to highlight the atrocities of Hamas committed on October the 7th, that what it is doing in Gaza is self-defense, that it is taking the utmost care not to target civilians. What South Africa is going to argue, going back in time, going back decades, that this is simply a pattern of Israel's occupation of the Palestinian people, and that it has simply escalated to unprecedented levels. Now, it is no coincidence that we heard from the Israeli Prime Minister. Israel is taking this very seriously indeed, speaking in English late last night, issuing a statement to the international community, and this is what he had to say.
I want to make a few points absolutely clear. Israel has no intention of permanently occupying Gaza or displacing its civilian population. Israel is fighting Hamas terrorists, not the Palestinian population. And we are doing so in full compliance with international law. The IDF is doing its utmost to minimize civilian casualties, while Hamas is doing its utmost to maximize them by using Palestinian civilians as human shields. The IDF urges Palestinian civilians to leave war zones by disseminating leaflets, making phone calls, providing safe passage corridors, while Hamas prevents Palestinians from leaving at gunpoint, and often with gunfire. Our goal is to rid Gaza of Hamas terrorists and free our hostages. Once this is achieved, Gaza can be demilitarized and de-radicalized, thereby creating a possibility for a better future for Israel and Palestinians alike.
So South Africa will be pointing at three highlights of how they're going to present this case. One, the categoric military campaign, the extensive military campaign that Israel has carried out, knowing also how capable Israel is carrying out precision strikes. Over 80% of the Gaza Strip's infrastructure and homes have been completely destroyed. Also, the humanitarian level, the withholding of humanitarian aid, the cutting off of water, of holding back its food and medical supplies. And third, also it will be highlighting the rhetoric that has come out from the highest levels of government here, from the Israeli Defense Ministry, even from the Prime Minister, from other ministers, calling for the burning of Gaza, calling the Palestinians in Gaza the same as human animals, would be dealt with as such, calling for the withholding, the siege of the Gaza Strip, withholding water, withholding food, and it goes on. So all these things will be highlighted in South Africa's case. Again, these are preliminary measures that South Africa is calling for, but legal analysts will tell you that even if the court will rule that, yes, preliminarily, Israel is responsible for carrying out acts of genocide or not preventing acts of genocide, it will have huge political and diplomatic implications, also morally and symbolically, because the UN Genocide Convention was set up after the Second World War in the wake of the Holocaust. To try to ensure that something like this would never happen again. To have Israel in the dock and potentially accused of it certainly sends a very powerful message.
All right, Stephanie Decker live for us there in occupied East Jerusalem. Stephanie, thank you.